With us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, but to the point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Happy Easter Monday. Lots coming up this lunchtime. The row over sending illegal immigrants to Rwanda rumbles on. Parliament is back tomorrow. What will Boris Johnson say about his Partygate fine? It'll be his 1,000th day as Prime Minister. We're also discussing women's safety, and my Real Me interview is with Labour MP Mike Amesbury. He thinks we need more ordinary people in Parliament. First, here's your news with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's just gone 12 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. The Home Secretary has challenged critics of her plan to send migrants to Rwanda to come up with a better idea. She's written a joint article in the Times newspaper with the Rwandan Foreign Minister, and Priti Patel reiterated that her controversial plans were bold and innovative. Well, the leader of the Church of England, Justin Welby, said the proposals were ungodly and raised serious ethical questions. Dover and Deal MP Natalie Elfiki told GB News people in her constituency demand action and that this new policy will provide people with a safe place of refuge.
Rwanda has experience in this, it has capacity, it has opportunity, it wants to help people set up a new life in Rwanda. So that seems to me to be a really important point, that people will be given the opportunity to set up a new life. They will be supported. They'll be supported by the British taxpayer.
The Prime Minister will face MPs in the Commons tomorrow in his first appearance since he and the Chancellor were fined for a gathering held against coronavirus rules in the Cabinet Room in June of 2020. Well, Boris Johnson's expected to urge MPs to move on from Partygate, insisting instead that there are bigger issues to focus on. Conservative MP Greg Hands told us Boris Johnson is looking forward to being questioned by MPs after the Easter recess.
The fact that he has apologised, he's paid the fine, he's expressed regret at what has happened, but equally I think he wants to outline how he's getting on with the job and how the government is getting on with the job. But I'm sure he's relishing the chance to be back in the Commons explaining to MPs.
In some international news now, Russia has renewed its assault on western and southern regions in Ukraine. Lviv's mayor says at least 7 people have been killed after 5 missile strikes hit the city overnight. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister says for the second day in a row, no evacuation corridors have been opened. Well, one Ukrainian MP based in Odessa, Alexei Gonkoncharo, told us that Ukrainian soldiers have ignored a Russian ultimatum to lay down arms in the besieged port city of Mariupol.
The worst situation is in Mariupol, where Ukrainian fighters are continuing to fight and they refuse to surrender. And that is absolutely heroical. But what is the problem? That many civilians in the city they don't have a possibility to leave the city, to save their lives, to come to safety. And that is Russian style of war. Humanitarian catastrophe, war crimes, devastations, terrorizing of the civilians.
The final coronavirus restrictions in Scotland are lifted today, so there's no longer a legal requirement to wear a face mask on public transport and in some indoor public places. Also from today, the rules move to guidance. Lateral flow tests will no longer be freely available, but they will continue for health and social care workers and for those visiting vulnerable people in care homes or hospitals. Well, in the midst of this, Scotland's First Minister has been reported to the police after footage posted on social media appeared to show her not wearing a face mask indoors on Saturday. Well, let's get more of the details. We can go live to our Scotland reporter, Davy Donaldson. Davy, good afternoon. Explain to us what happened and what the SNP have had to say.
Yeah, this happened during a visit, Rosie, on Saturday to a barber shop in East Kilbride. Now, the First Minister posted footage there showing that she'd forgot to put a mask on for a couple of seconds, then put a mask on. Since then, there's been more footage, apparently of the same trip, where she isn't wearing a mask at all, and interacting with people. So that's how it's come about. Lord Dems in Scotland have called it hypocrisy, really, and a lot of people would think that that's the case. But yeah, this is going to rumble on, no doubt about it. This video is around on social media, and a lot of people can see it. And the First Minister is going to have a lot of questions to ask later in the week during First Minister's Questions on Thursday.
Davey, thank you for the update. Now, thousands of volunteers who joined the coronavirus vaccination programme have now got permanent jobs in the NHS. New figures show over 11,000 people who helped deliver jabs have decided to stay in the health service. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, says that's a positive boost to the service, which is struggling with not only staff shortages, but also a huge backlog caused by the pandemic. There's more travel chaos expected on the roads and rail services today, with millions of us returning from Easter getaways. The RAC is predicting almost 4 million drivers to make journeys today, causing delays on many major routes. There's also huge queues currently for Eurostar customers at Gare du Nord in Paris after a border control IT failure. Some passengers haven't been able to board for more than an hour. We'll keep you up to date here on GB News and bring you more news as it happens. Now let's head to the lunchtime briefing with Gloria.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, Priti Patel has hit back at critics of her plan to send immigrants to Rwanda as the Archbishop of Canterbury weighs into the row. Conservative MP Scott Benton, a devout Christian, tells me what he makes of the policy. MPs return from their Easter break tomorrow. How will Boris Johnson defend his behaviour now he's been fined by the Met Police for breaking lockdown laws? Our political correspondent Tom Howard will tell us. I'll discuss women's safety with Liberal Democrat MP Christine Jardine. And my Real Me interview is with Labour MP Mike Amesbury. He says there should be far more ordinary people in Parliament. Give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Well, they say a week is a long time in politics, and a 2-week parliamentary recess certainly is a long time. Our political correspondent, Tom Howard, is with me. Tom, it is good to be back. I've had a 2 weeks holiday. Did I miss anything?
Well, Gloria, it's pretty extraordinary that when you left 2.5 weeks ago, the Chancellor was still one of the most popular politicians in Britain. Boris Johnson was having a bounce back in the polls, being seen pretty widely to have handled the Ukraine crisis relatively well. Yes, there were some rumblings with regard to the cost of living, and the Chancellor's statement hadn't gone down particularly well. But ultimately, this was a government that seemed to be getting back to grips with things. Certainly a lot more stable a government than existed in January and February this year. Well, what a 2.5 weeks it's been. What a change has happened, because since you departed for sunnier shores, the Prime Minister has, of course, had his first COVID fine. The Chancellor, incredibly surprisingly, has had a fine as well. And, of course, a number of stories came out about the Chancellor's wife's tax affairs and, indeed, the Chancellor's level of wealth as well. Clearly, this is a government that is now more on the ropes than it has been in quite some time.
And MPs go back to Parliament tomorrow. It'll be the first time that the Prime Minister has faced MPs since he got that COVID fine that you mentioned. What's he going to say? What should he say?
Well, it's interesting. The Prime Minister looks like he's going to do a bit of a combination statement to Parliament tomorrow. He will address the fine, he will address Partygate more widely, but also he will try and move that conversation on, try and make it look like this is business as usual. It's a very busy week ahead for the Prime Minister. Of course, there's a lot on his plate, and more that he's piling onto his plate as well, particularly in the realm of international foreign affairs as well. But the Prime Minister will be trying to address this, although he's under considerable pressure because it's likely this is not the last time that he will need to address this. The fact of this particular gathering on the 19th of June 2020, the fact that reach the level of a fine has suggested to many people that this will not be the last one. Of course, let's not forget that this was a pretty innocuous, short event of people having a sing-song in the cabinet room before a meeting. Indeed, the Prime Minister had a sing-song with school children at a primary school just a couple of hours beforehand. That didn't seem
He wasn't pouring
to
the drinks
break
at the primary school.
There's not a suggestion that there was drinks at this particular event, although there's a suggestion at other events that there are drinks, which is why the fact that this particular event, one that actually appeared in the newspapers the following day and no one seemed to mind at the time, the fact that this relatively low-level event seems to have reached the threshold for a COVID fine suggests that there will be more on the way, and that might become more politically difficult for the Prime Minister. If there's this sense of a drip of further fines, if he needs to address this again and again in Parliament, and then when the police investigation finally concludes, Sue Gray's report ultimately coming out with all the gory details for everyone to see, finally, after it has been delayed and delayed and delayed, and the Prime Minister making a further statement in Parliament, as he's promised to do upon the publication of that report, well, things could get more difficult for the Prime Minister down the road.
And finally, and briefly, if you would, he's flying off to India towards the end of this week. Why?
Well, this is part of the Prime Minister's international gambit this week. Towards the end of the week, he will be flying off to India for the first time as Prime Minister, meeting the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, talking actually in terms of trade, in terms of defence as well. Of course, India has been pretty concerningly neutral on the Russia-Ukraine situation. He'll be trying to bring the Indians more over to the Western alliance when it comes to that. But also, of course, this is the Prime Minister taking his stride on the world stage. He's seen to be able to sort of rise above a little bit the parochial nature of Partygate, particularly with his walkabout with President Zelensky just over a week ago in Kiev, when he was seen to have done very well with his relationship and global leadership on the issue of Ukraine. Potentially more international trips in the eyes of Number 10 is a way to move that conversation forward.
Tom, I've missed your insights. It's good to chat again. Cheers. So MPs are back in Parliament tomorrow. The Prime Minister is under pressure, given he has been fined for breaking lockdown law, while Home Secretary Priti Patel is hitting back at critics of the plan to send illegal immigrants to Rwanda. Joining me now is Conservative MP for Blackpool South, Scott Benton. Scott, happy Easter. It is good to see you. Thank you for interrupting your Easter break for us. Tomorrow, the Prime Minister will address MPs for the first time since he's been issued with that fine for breaking COVID rules. What would you like him to say?
Hi, Gloria. Happy Easter to you and all of your viewers. Certainly going to be a very interesting statement. As Tom's just alluded to, it's been an incredibly busy 2.5 weeks since the House of Commons has sat. So not only have we had the fantastic new plans for immigration, which have hit the headlines, but also the Prime Minister has been fined. I share the anger of a lot of my constituents in relation to the issuing of those fines. Boris has made it clear that he has made a mistake. The government have made mistakes. And of course, since the Partygate story first broke in December and January, a number of steps have been taken to really clean out the Number 10 operation and to try and move that forward. So it's clear that the Prime Minister has a lot of work to do in terms of regaining the trust, certainly of some of my voters who voted Conservative for the first time in 2019 and who are looking for strong leadership from the Prime Minister. But as far as I'm concerned, as a backbench Conservative MP, the Prime Minister has apologised. We have huge challenges ahead, not just on the cost of living crisis, on the economy, on tackling those small boats, but primarily, of course, with the crisis in Eastern Europe and Ukraine as well. So that's what I'll be looking for from the Prime Minister tomorrow. I think he needs to apologise once again, draw a line under the issue, and then hopefully we can move on and focus on those key domestic challenges.
And Conservative MPs will have that private meeting with the Prime Minister tomorrow evening. Some of your colleagues, Conservative MPs, in that meeting will be more critical. You have been, fairly balanced. You're angry. You've been honest about the anger that you feel and the need for him to apologise again. But for those people who want to take it further, for those Tory MPs who actually think he's got to go, what do you say to them?
Well, two things really. Not just let's come together as a party. Parties lose elections when they're weak and divided. We've seen that with the Labour opposition over the last 10 years as well. So we need to unite behind the Prime Minister and move forward. But he does need to apologise. And of course, over the next few weeks, there may well be other fines issued and events could twist in a whole new direction as well. But as far as I'm concerned, Boris Johnson is the best person to lead the country forward. I'm sure there'll be further rumblings next week when we get back to Parliament. But let's be quite clear. For example, what we saw last week was some of those who've initially stated that they've written into the 1922 committee have since withdrawn those letters from Graham Brady. And in the case of people like Dominic Ross, for example, they've made it quite clear that although the Prime Minister has made mistakes, he's got a huge amount of work to do to regain trust. They don't necessarily think now is the best time to replace the Prime Minister. So I expect the mutterings, if you like, for want of a better word, will be very sidelined when we go back to Parliament tomorrow. And I would expect the Parliamentary Party to move on and focus on the challenges ahead.
Now, as we said at the start of this interview, today is Easter Monday. You are a man of faith. Why is the Easter weekend important to you?
I think the Easter weekend and the Easter message, really, in terms of Christianity, is one of new life and rebirth and starting again. And sometimes that's relevant to politics, and certainly judging by some of the challenges ahead. So as a person of faith, I've had a few days off just to regroup and reflect on the challenges ahead. And it certainly does put everything into perspective, I think it's fair to say, not just for practicing Christians, but for the rest of the country as a whole, when you focus on that Easter message of new life, rebirth and starting again. I think politicians, as well as the rest of society, can take a lot from that message, not only about how we run the country, but about how we lead our own personal lives and reflect upon the comings and goings in Westminster in a sense of perspective.
And speaking of men of faith, Justin Welby used his Easter Day sermon yesterday to criticise the government's new policy to see migrants given a one-way ticket to Rwanda. He said it was the opposite of the nature of God. What do you say?
Well, I've a number of feelings on the leadership of the Church of England, and it's quite interesting to be commenting upon them during the Easter weekend. What we've seen over a number of decades are the congregations in Anglican churches declining for a number of reasons, of course. As a society, we're less religious than we were a number of decades ago. However, I do think the Church of England faces a huge challenge in the decades ahead. I've been fairly critical about the lack of leadership from the Church on some theological issues and social values in the country. And I do think it's quite a bizarre situation where we have the leadership of the Church of England who have failed to offer an opinion on a number of different social issues affecting the UK. Some of the changes we've seen, for example, on abortion in Parliament only 3 weeks ago. The Church was very silent on those, when as a Christian you would arguably expect it to take a pretty robust position. And yet here we have a situation where on the government's immigration plan, the Church of England have been quite vocal and using the Easter weekend to essentially attack the government's plan, I think will have disappointed many Christians. That's not to say that the Church doesn't have a role and can offer an opinion. Of course it should, not just on immigration, but on other issues affecting society as a whole. But to do so on the Easter weekend and to detract from that core Christian message, as a Christian and an Anglican, I felt that was particularly disappointing and inappropriate of the Archbishop of Canterbury to do so.
Scott Benton, the Conservative MP for Blackpool South, thank you for your time today. Thank you. After the break, we'll be joined by Boris Johnson's former advisor when he was Mayor of London to look back at the first 1,000 days of the Prime Minister's premiership. Before that, it's time for your weather.
Let's look ahead to the weather this afternoon. The UK's looking dry for many, but the risk of a few showers across the north and the west. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England will see quite a few showers this afternoon. There will be some bright and sunny spells developing at times. Feeling fresher, though. What about southeast England and the London area? There's going to be plenty of warm, hazy sunshine and some light winds too. Temperatures there reaching around 18 Celsius. Let's head over to Wales. There's going to be plenty of sunny spells this afternoon. Also the risk of showers, which could be quite heavy at times. If we cross up now to the Midlands and up to the northwest of England, it's going to be dry for most of us with some sunshine here as well. A few showers around, but if they are, they should be light in nature while they hang around. Highs around 14 degrees. In the northeast of England, there's going to be plenty of sunshine, but do have an umbrella in case of the odd shower. Feeling pleasant, though, when the sun is shining with highs of 14. Rain is clearing over the Shetlands this afternoon. Otherwise, much of Scotland's going to be bright with sunny spells and scattered showers. Feeling quite fresh, though, a little bit cooler here with 12 degrees. That should be about average from mid-April. There's going to be a fairly bright afternoon across Northern Ireland, with perhaps a few showers developing from time to time. So across the day, showers will continue this evening and across the north and the west of the UK. It should be dry elsewhere. That's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I've got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. We can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat.
Every weekday at 1, you're on the money.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, Boris Johnson will mark his 1,000th day as Prime Minister as Parliament returns tomorrow, and he'll celebrate it by giving a statement in the House of Commons over breaking his own COVID lockdown rules. What a journey it's been. He has got Brexit done, dealt with a pandemic. To look back at his premiership, we are joined by Culvia Ranger, former Transport, Environment and Digital Advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Mayor of London. Hello, nice to see you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Gloria. Good afternoon, and to your viewers.
You know Boris Johnson in a way that most of us don't. What was he like to work with?
He's a lightning rod. He's a politician and a man who is always on a mission. I think, you can see that in how he comes across, but he genuinely is like that, day to day, hour by hour, minute by minute, full of energy, full of determination to look at not just the glass being half full, but overflowing with opportunity of what can be done. And I think that's what makes him unique. He's a man who believes in getting things done. Now, we've heard that phrase when it was coined around Brexit, but he genuinely believes it. There is no challenge. That actually is beyond the wit of man or beyond the wit of a prime minister to get done. We know politicians get mired in all kinds of challenges when it comes to delivering improvements, better policies, dealing with those problems that, get kicked into the long grass. Boris believes in taking them out of the long grass and really shaking them up. And if it means shaking up Whitehall, shaking up the Conservative Party and shaking up Parliament, that's the approach he takes to moving things forward. And I think that's what we've seen in his first 1,000 days as Prime Minister.
What do you think he's found most challenging about being Prime Minister? What are the tougher bits that we've seen in those 1,000 days?
I think the hard thing has been finding people around him who can carry his message forward in the way he wants to see that. Boris is unique. It's been said many times before. And it takes people who understand that uniqueness, who can work with that type of politician, of which, as I've said, there aren't many, if any, around. So others won't be used to that. And therefore, finding that rhythm, that understanding to work with a prime minister like that, to use his political capital to deliver at the tempo that he wants to see delivery is hard for him and for the people around him. But I think he's finding that. It takes time. We came together as a team in 2008 in City Hall, almost as strangers, but we had a certain desire, a passion to get things done, which I think brought us all together and saw, I believe, quite a lot of success in delivery in the time Boris was Mayor of London, especially in that first 4 years. He's been looking, and I think people around him have been looking to replicate that, get that right team. It is a team activity being in number 10 and running the government. It takes a cabinet to deliver these policies, and it takes a great leader to provide the political capital to do it. That doesn't always align at the same time. But we've seen with the big Herculean challenges he's faced, let's be honest, Gloria, it's not been an easy time to be Prime Minister. He has found that at times and therefore moved the country forward with the challenges it's faced.
Has anything surprised you about the way he has governed? Have there been moments when you've thought, I didn't expect him to do that?
No, I expect the unexpected when it comes to Boris, because that's the uniqueness. If there is a route that requires a certain amount of confidence, a certain amount of pure leadership, he has taken that challenge on. And, that's why the country responded to him when he went to the polls. That general election landslide that this Conservative Party had not seen since 1987. It took many of us by surprise, but it was that campaigning his message to the people. Now, in the intervening 999 days, he's obviously faced the global pandemic. He got the Brexit done, but he had to change the Conservative Party. He had to look at what the constitution of it in terms of the people that were within it, and solve this question about Europe. That was very difficult. It isn't an easy thing to do. He has undoubtedly upset some people in the way he has taken his approach. But he saw a pathway to move the party forward. We can all remember the days of Theresa May before that. The Conservative Party, Parliament seemed mired in treacle. It wasn't going anywhere. The country was going nowhere. Yet Boris had to find a way to resolve that for his party, for Parliament and for the country. Now, that's a real prime example of doing things differently, things that upset people, but getting the job done. And then I think he's taken that approach in everything he's faced. I think, look, the pandemic, impossible for anyone to second guess the decisions that had to be made, especially the early days of the pandemic. The whole world was in shock at the tragedy that was unfolding, and politicians had to make very big decisions very quickly. But again, in the aftermath, we've seen that the decisions he and the government made have worked out well.
Let me just interrupt because we're running out of time, and I do want to ask you this. Tomorrow he's going to meet MPs for the first time. He'll address Parliament. It'll be the first time he's seen MPs and been in Parliament since being issued with that COVID fine. If you were advising him today, what would you say he needs to do tomorrow?
I think Boris has that humility of accepting when things haven't gone quite right. And I think he has said it. He's apologised for, what appears that he broke the letter of the law. I believe it was unintentional. He hasn't intended to have any kind of celebration, and he will take that conciliatory tone. And I think as a leader, He has that. I spent many days, weeks, months sitting next to him when we were making decisions, and sometimes we hadn't quite got it right. And he would say, okay, we will say we haven't quite got it right, but we will move on. We will move forward. There's more to be done. And I think he will have that passion, and that burning is definitely still there to deliver on the levelling up agenda, to deliver on supporting the Ukraine and being at the leadership point of helping them in their war against President Putin, to make sure that the country's cost of living crisis is dealt with. He has a passion to deliver on these big challenges. I think he'll continue to demonstrate that tomorrow and going forward.
Been really interesting to talk to you. You gave a very generous account of the Prime Minister. No doubt there'll be others who take a different view, but we do appreciate your view. Thank you. And speaking of different views, after the break, we'll be speaking to Christine Jardine, the Liberal Democrat MP, on requiring developers to publish an assessment on women's safety, plus, of course, the latest on Boris Johnson as Parliament returns tomorrow. Plus, the real me with Labour MP Mike Amesbury told me about how hard it was losing his mum and that we should have more working-class MPs in Parliament. That's after the news.
It's 12:30. Good afternoon. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Russia has renewed its assault on western and southern regions in Ukraine. Lviv's mayor says at least 7 people have been killed after 5 missile strikes hit the city overnight. The country's deputy prime minister says for the second day in a row, no evacuation corridors have been opened. The Home Secretary says critics of her plan to send migrants to Rwanda have failed to offer their own solutions. Writing in The Times with the Rwandan Foreign Minister, Priti Patel said her plans were bold and innovative. It's after the leader of the Church of England, Justin Welby, said the proposals were ungodly and raised serious ethical questions. Boris Johnson's going to face MPs in the Commons tomorrow in his first appearance since he and the Chancellor were both fined for breaching coronavirus rules in a gathering held in the Cabinet Room in June of 2020. The Prime Minister is expected to urge MPs to move on from Partygate, insisting there are bigger issues to focus on. The final coronavirus restrictions in Scotland are being lifted today. People will no longer be legally required to wear face masks on public transport and in indoor public spaces. From today, the rules change to be guidance. Lateral flow tests will no longer be freely available, but will continue in some health and social care settings. Volunteers are being lined up to drive ambulances as part of a pilot scheme due to launch next month. The London Ambulance Service says volunteers will be trained and equipped to offer support with emergency calls in their area. Well, new figures last week show response times and A&E performance in England has dropped to its lowest level on record. You're up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, on 9 and DAB+ radio. Now, we'll head back shortly to Gloria and the briefing.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
We all care about women's safety, and Christine Jardine, Liberal Democrat MP, is trying to change the law to make developers, that's property developers, publish an assessment on women's safety as a condition of planning permission. And today is also the day all restrictions in Scotland have ended with regards to COVID, and Christine joins me now. Good to see you. Happy Easter. Just your thoughts on all COVID restrictions in Scotland being lifted today. You welcome that?
I do, actually. It's hopefully it's because we've made progress. We are all still very concerned about COVID, very worried about COVID. And although the restrictions have been lifted, we are still being recommended to use the protections, to wear masks in crowded places. And there's nothing to stop us wearing masks going into shops and pubs and things. It does, it becomes sort of guidance. So although we feel a wee bit like this is a good sign, we're still concerned that we need to just beware and not think that we've got COVID beaten, because it could still come back again. We could have another wave. So just take care.
And just staying with Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon has been reported to the police for breaking her own mask laws on a campaign visit to a barber's on Saturday. How serious do you think that is for her?
Not very, to be honest. That may sound unusual, considering that I'm usually a very stern critic of the First Minister. But I think, it's something that she has apologised for. She made a genuine mistake. Politicians should all be setting an example, and we all do our best at all times. Well, most of us do our best at all times to follow the rules. But this has been explained. She simply forgot for a minute. Now, in the current circumstances, lots of people have been caught out. You get out of your car, you go into a shop, you think, I don't have my mask on, and you have to go back. So I think there's a world of a difference between what the mistake that Nicola Sturgeon has made and the situation we're in with the Prime Minister, and breaking the rules that he set. But there's a difference between someone making a genuine mistake. And yes, Nicola Sturgeon should be setting an example for us all. But there's a difference between that situation and the situation where you openly, flagrantly break the rules that you're telling other people that they should be following, and have a party when you're telling the rest of us not only that we can't have parties, but that we're foregoing funerals, weddings, christenings, birthday parties. The rest of us were foregoing birthday parties. That, lots of us have had to go through grief in this, and it just feels like the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer and everybody else who was taking part in these parties was showing absolute contempt for what people were going through. That's a world of a difference.
And what tools do you have when Parliament returns tomorrow? There's talk of a motion to hold him in contempt of Parliament, or to start a standards inquiry, something that, frankly, you're not going to win because there's more Tory MPs than opposition MPs.
Well, there are more Tory MPs than opposition MPs. That's why we're appealing to the Conservative MPs and saying, look, this is not good for the country. It's a bad example. We are facing a war in Europe. We are not directly involved in the war, but we're seeing the situation in Ukraine as a threat to us all. There's the economic crisis, the cost of living crisis. We need a Prime Minister at the moment, Gloria, that the country can have faith in, that the country can believe if he tells us that something is necessary, then it is necessary. And we need a government that doesn't look quite as out of touch with the rest of us, with reality. The reality of the crisis that we're all facing, as Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak do. And they're making the government look detached. One rule for them, a different rule for the rest of us. That's not what the country needs now.
Kristen, I'm going to interrupt you because I want to use the final question, actually, to talk about the debate that you've secured in Parliament on Wednesday to change the law to require developers to publish an assessment of women's safety as a condition of planning permission for major developments. I just want you to give us some examples, if you would. We've got about a minute, I'm afraid, to go.
Yeah, briefly, I think we've had so many problems in this country. Women are still dying. I mean, I remember as a teenager the protests about women's safety in the streets. What we need is reassurance. Women need to know that their needs are being taken into account in planning. The government is moving forward with the model code, but we do need some way of ensuring that we can be reassured that it's been taken into account by developers, that there are national standards, and things like if you live in an apartment block, that, you know, the bin storage is lit, that there are no, unlit facades, that there are no places where women are walking, where anybody is walking, because we all need our safety protected. And that's what I want to see is a national discussion. Look at how we reassure everyone that we are safe in our streets and that every step is being taken. Because part of that safety will be confidence. Confidence that we are safe in the streets, and we need to know that.
And I'd love to talk to you about that in more detail as your moves to change the law progress. But thank you for your time today, Christine Jardine, and happy Easter to you.
Happy Easter. Nice to see you, Gloria.
Now, my Real Me interview today is with Labour MP for Weaver Vale, Mike Amesbury. He feels strongly that we need more working class MPs in Parliament and spoke movingly about the death of his mother. Mike Amesbury, you are 52.
Yep.
There's not that much about you online, actually. Let's start at the beginning. What did your mum and dad do?
Well, my mum was initially worked on the dinners,
Dinner lady.
Dinner lady, yeah. My dad was a carpet fitter, a company called Not Mill Carpets, out of Manchester, kind of born in Wythenshawe, and then ended up over the Castleford area, West Yorkshire. Perhaps you'll be familiar with. Eventually become publicans. So literally did grow up part of my life in a pub.
What age were you when you moved into the pub?
I think it was around 15.
Oh my
something
gosh,
like
so
that,
you
yeah.
started to get interested in alcohol.
Yeah.
Right. Was it fun?
It was. It was, I mean, a bit like, in terms of being a member of Parliament, lots of people, if you live in the community, which I do, everyone wants to slice you and know it's a bit like that, being a publican's son and my mum and dad, really. The regulars become friends of the family.
Yeah.
So.
And you joined the Labour Party when you were 17?
17, yes.
Were your parents members of the Labour Party? Or...
No, my dad was a shop steward in the past. It was a glass factory he worked in at some stage. So he was certainly interested in politics, and it was a Labour area. And I saw a lot of work that the local Labour Party did in terms of the miners' strike. So I'm not saying they necessarily always got it right, but yes. So it's closest to my political beliefs, really.
And so the miners' strike, 84, 85, trying to do my maths.
Yes.
I mean, you're still young.
Yes.
But you were political, and you remember images from that strike, and it was the biggest industrial dispute of our generation, wasn't it?
Yes. And of course, a lot of our customers in the pub were miners, and they were out for a year with very little money other than charity and mutual aid, really. So, and it affected other businesses. And of course, they were our customers beyond the strike as well. So, yeah.
Were you the first in your family to go to university?
I was, yeah. So, mightily proud of that. I didn't do particularly well at school. So I left school, 1985 was a key date in my life, isn't it, really? And there wasn't much in the way of work. So I had spells of unemployment and manual jobs, really. So I'd had long spells of youth unemployment, really. Eventually I decided to go into further education. And I did a BTEC, which the current government, obviously controversially, getting rid of. And then I ended up going to what's called Ilkley College. So it was a...
I went to Bradford College because it was Bradford and Ilkley Community College I went to.
So
The
perhaps
Bradford
again,
bits.
you're familiar with, and I did. I got a degree. I got involved with student politics as well. I was president of the student union at Wakefield, and then I was president of the union at Ilkley, and then Labour politics, union politics, you name it.
Once you went back into further education, did you think I'm going to go university? That's for me. That's where this is going to end up. When you started doing your BTEC?
No, I'd say it was my granddad Ted, that inspired me. He was many years a chief technician in the RAF, amongst other things, working on the Vulcan bombers, the old nuclear deterrent. So, and he encouraged me to go all the way, and that really helps, because I always felt that it wasn't for people like me, university, higher education. So no, I went for it.
And you said that you had a number of manual jobs. What was the toughest?
I've done all kinds of things, really. I once worked at a bookbinder's and used to laminate, 100 books a day, and that was quite... It was production line stuff,
Yeah.
They once called me a trainee sign engineer, and that was putting up signs on quite large buildings, such as post offices and everything else. There was no training. You end up doing it, going up rope ladders in some quite windy weather and things at the time. So that was a tough one. I worked at Manchester Airport on stage as well. So went kind of back to the home turf, Wythenshawe, a company called Service Air, and that was just in a bonded warehouse, filling up the trolleys that go up and down the planes when people are enjoying themselves with a duty free.
So you have definitely had normal jobs, what people would call normal jobs, which makes you something of a rarity in Parliament. Of course, there are some, but it's not the majority anymore.
No, it's not. And that's something that needs to happen, doesn't it? Right across the piece, really. We've certainly got more women in Parliament, which is massive progress that needs to continue. But in terms of social class, and class is still alive and kicking. Sitting on those green benches for the first time and listening to that strange language and those strange customs and practices. You can't even speak human. I can't say you, as you well know.
You've got to say the honourable.
The honourable, the right honourable, the gallant, and you pulled up on it. But obviously, you get on top of the strange and quirky customs and practices. Hopefully at some stage they'll change, but it's slow, isn't it? That place is slow to change.
What would your message be to young working class people who think, gosh, they could never be a member of Parliament, but it would improve our politics, wouldn't it?
It would, and go for it. One of the few things probably American politics gets right, where they talk about, look, and anybody could be the president of the United States, can aspire to, the very top. Here, there are considerable barriers in the way, deliberately put in our way. Well, kick those barriers down, kick those walls down. That's the important thing that people have got to do from, working class backgrounds.
Do you ever feel intimidated by all the posh people in Parliament?
Do I?
Ever feel intimidated by all the many posh people in Parliament?
I think you're kind of brought up that way, and then you realise, well, you might talk posh, you might sound clever, but listen to the detail. And then you quickly realise that that's not the case. Despite all that money spent on very expensive education, then, right from the very top, yes, it quickly dispels that myth.
Now, I didn't know this about you when I was doing my research. So you worked as an advisor for Angela Rayner before you got elected to Parliament.
I did.
Was that before she was famous, as it were?
Yes, yes.
Go on, tell us what she was like then, really.
What you see is what you get, quite genuinely. A real character. I helped Angie with a selection. She spoke to me, said, look, will you work for me? I'd always said no. A number of MPs in the past, I'm not naming names, but said, will you work for me? I'd always said no. I couldn't think of anything worse. The ego and everything else that comes speaking now, hopefully. I'm a different example. But Angie was very different. a working class woman that's quite fiery. It's incredibly bright. She's everything the Labour Party is about, isn't she, really, in terms of social mobility? And obviously I relate to aspects of her background and the backstory. So yeah, I worked for her for a couple of years. Left on good terms, she's still a good friend of mine.
Do you think we'll ever see Prime Minister Angela Rayner?
I mean, I obviously we've got Keir Starmer as the leader at the moment, and I want to see Keir Starmer as the Prime Minister.
So you were elected in 2017. Obviously, it's such a proud moment. I remember that moment. It's not just pride for yourself and an honour for yourself, but it means a great deal to one's parents.
Yeah.
But you lost your mum shortly before that 2017 election.
Yes, I did. So my mum, unfortunately, I mean, she was a great fighter, and that's where I get some of the fighting spirit from. She always encouraged me. She fought off breast cancer, and unfortunately got secondary cancer, a brain tumour. Yes, and obviously didn't win that fight. But I was very proud my dad could come and see me in Parliament, and they had mass for my mother, so Father Pat. So around that period when I was elected, so she was there in spirit. Yes.
It's obviously a really tough thing to do, and sometimes people get emotional during these interviews, and that helps to humanise politicians. But I can see you've reined it back now. So let's get back to politics. You have been in opposition since you got elected, obviously in 2017, but actually you've changed the law.
Yes.
Which is not something that I could have ever said, and I had 9.5 years there.
Yes.
Very few MPs can have claimed to change the law, but you changed the law on the cost of school uniforms.
Yes.
First of all, why was that important to you? And secondly, give MPs some tips on how you can change the law in opposition as, I don't know if you're a backbench MP but you certainly want it in the cabinet, in the shadow cabinet.
Yes. There's so many children and families and parents, carers, grandparents are struggling. Even before we had the COVID pandemic, and now we're calling the cost of living crisis, just to make ends meet. And the astronomical cost of school uniforms, and I was lobbied quite hard. Just experiences you have, your own community with your friends and family and constituents. And then nationally as well, so the likes of the National Children's Society and others, had said, look, this is a cause that's not got across the line, even though successive governments have spoke about, bringing down the cost of school uniforms, statutory guidance as it was. Says, right, well, I'll be the person. I'll come out number one. You have this lottery, don't you?
Yeah.
It's kind of bizarre. Again, another bizarre thing about Parliament. And then the phone didn't stop running, the emails and everything else. You think you'd won the lottery. In a way you have, in terms of, a real chance to change the law. But then, of course, the government's got an 80-seat majority. So you've got to build coalitions and convince people that it's the right cause. And remind people what they've said very publicly. Previous Secretary of State of Education. It was something in our manifesto as well, the Labour manifesto. And in all fairness to the likes of Nick Gibbs, I'd say in particular, the schools minister, I've never spent so much time in the government whip's office, by the way, building those coalitions and then getting it through every stage of Parliament, which you're right, is a challenge. In the midst of a national, international health pandemic, by the way. So we had the COVID bumps in the road. But we got there. One of the biggest drivers, of course, were the parents and actually the children themselves. So the amount of emails, and they bombarded various people, including the Jacob Rees-Mogg and his role as leader of the House, when we thought things were going to be timed out, but we got there.
And what law did you change? Tell us what practical effect.
Yes, so it's statutory guidance around school uniforms, putting cost centre stage. So it'll ensure that affordability is something that head teachers, school governors must build into the DNA of any kind of uniform policy going forward. It'll also open up competition, which is important, because you will know that from your own previous experience, you have that strange arrangement where there's one manufacturer and one provider, and they've done some kind of a bit of historical deal with the school. So that will bring costs down. And it'll also celebrate good practice where schools, say, look, actually, minimise the branded items and then go to the local supermarket for various items. Swap shops as well, so that's a part of the legislation going forward to encourage that good practice. But very importantly, has the law behind parents and carers and grandparents now. So if it's too expensive, and listeners, viewers, we're very familiar with branded items, caps, scarves, ties, socks, even masks recently in the pandemic. It's not on. It's not acceptable. It's pricing out working class children.
And what do you do if you're a parent that thinks, hang on a minute, this is a racket, this? What should you do? Contact your MP? Because the law's on your side, that's what you're saying.
Well, as a result of that law, you can go through, initially go through the normal channels, that'll be the head teacher, the governors, but you can go right to the Secretary of State. Lots of schools are positively responding to this and going forward, changing their school uniform policies. There's some great ones out there already. There's some terrible ones as well. So it's dealing with those terrible ones.
Mike Amesbury, I'm sure lots of parents will be grateful for that change in the law, and I'm sure your mum, I'm sure is with you in spirit, would be very proud of you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
You've been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. It's good to be back. Join me again tomorrow at noon. Up next, it's Darren Grimes with Real Britain. But first of all, let's see how the weather is looking.
Let's look ahead to the weather this afternoon. The UK is looking dry for many, but the risk of a few showers across the north and the west. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England will see quite a few showers this afternoon. There will be some bright and sunny spells developing at times. Feeling fresher though. What about southeast England and the London area? There's going to be plenty of warm, hazy sunshine and some light winds too. Temperatures there reaching around 18 Celsius. Let's head over to Wales. There's going to be plenty of sunny spells this afternoon. Also the risk of showers, which could be quite heavy at times. If we cross up now to the Midlands and up to the northwest of England, it's going to be dry for most of us with some sunshine here as well. A few showers around, but if they are, they should be light in nature while they hang around. Highs around 14 degrees. In the northeast of England, there's going to be plenty of sunshine, but do have an umbrella in case of the odd shower. Feeling pleasant, though, when the sun is shining.